Please be warned, there may be stool-related jokes in this video. In fact, this video takes jokes about step stools to new heights. Ben Kretsch is a seriously classy guy, and not only did he agree to step up to make this video about stools for me, but he also refused to make stool-related jokes. So I'm going to put them at the end.
Hi, my name is Ben Kretsch, special guest star on this channel. You may recognize me from back in the early days of XM radio, or on Cool 106.1 FM in the mornings back in the late 90s. Phil has the serious honor and privilege of me doing the narration for this video. One of the fun projects you can do to use up scraps is a step stool. If you want to learn how to make ladders, a stool is naturally the first step. There are loads of designs out there. This one has raked or splayed side aprons and legs and an H-shaped stretcher, as well as a central stiffener or rib that not only holds the aprons in place, but strengthens the top considerably. Okay, no stool jokes. When Phil and Amy repaired the oak floor in the living room of their aged house, there was a small amount of hickory, just enough for a step stool. It was left over from the steps and the transition pieces. Hickory is great for this project because it is really hard and durable, and who doesn't want a stool they can leave to their kids in their will? But it also has some drawbacks. It can be brittle. If you don't pre-drill for screws, it'll split. It often chips out at the end of saw cuts or when you use a router. It also scorches when you drill holes, especially with a Forstner bit, and when you do rip cuts on a table saw. Any pauses during a pass through the table saw and you will have black arcs to sand away. The project also uses oak dowels, as you will see later. The offcuts from the living room steps weren't quite as wide as a useful step stool, so we cut the two mating edges straight and used biscuits to joint the two pieces together. For a strong joint that is aligned well, especially if you don't have a biscuit or dowel or domino joiner, a rabbet joint is a good choice. It provides more gluing surface, and it keeps the pieces of wood in place as you glue them together. The central rib was a bit narrow, and it has a nasty check, so another piece was glued along it to make it stronger and wider. The legs were all run through the table saw to make them the same width, as wide as the narrow piece of scrap would allow. The dimensions of nearly every part of this project were dictated by the scrap wood. Initially, we thought giving the legs and aprons 15-degree angles would be ideal, but during a quick check after making those cuts, it was obvious that was too much. A 10-degree by 10-degree compound cut resulted in more vertical legs and a stronger design, so we went back and redid all the cuts. The central rib holds the two side aprons at the correct angle, so it was cut into a trapezoid with 10 degrees at each end, which was wide enough for the aprons to be set back inside the outline of the top. The aprons were cut into matching trapezoids with 10 degrees at each side, and then cut lengthwise at the top and the bottom at parallel 10-degree angles. The legs were cut with compound angles at each end so they would stick out sideways and front to back by 10 degrees. Two pairs of legs were cut to complement each other. The good news is that they end up being reversible and swappable. They were matched to ensure they all had the same length. After the main pieces were cut, the H-stretcher would need to wait to be fit during the final assembly. So the next task was to mark the center line of the top and mark the sides and ends of the rib. This meant parts could be assembled symmetrically. Measuring off the middle of the center line, the pilot holes were marked at the center and equal distances away and dimpled in so the drill bit would not wander while drilling the pilot holes. All of our marks were on the underside of the wood, but if you are drilling a hole through a piece of wood, you stand a good chance of bad tear-outs as the drill bit emerges from the other side, so you really want to start from the visible side. Drilling pilot holes allowed the top to be flipped right side up and drilled so the holes were clean and tidy on the side that shows. A Forstner bit makes a great clean hole with a flat bottom. Keep in mind that Forstner bits get loaded and don't clear chips as well as a spade bit, but otherwise the holes they make are much cleaner, at least on the side you're drilling from. Since the plan was to use washer head screws for 3 of the holes and then, for a little side-to-side stiffness, use 2 oak dowels, 3 of the holes were drilled about halfway through the top, and 2 were drilled all the way through.
So, screw, 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 dowel, dowel.
All the holes match the half-inch diameter of the dowels being used. Especially when using a flat-sided drill bit like a Forstner on hickory, you need to go very slowly and pull the bit back over and over to clear out the dust and chips. If the bit gets loaded up, the compressed chips will rub against the sides of the hole and get very hot, like if you were trying to start a fire with a stick. Not only will you burn the wood, but the bit can get so hot it loses its temper and then will blunt in a very short time. In this case, the drill press was set to 800 RPM to help keep heat to a minimum.
Okay. Screw, 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 dowel, dowel, and then across here, dowel, dowel, or screw, screw. This double stick tape is gone bad.
The rib was then stuck down with double-sided tape and clamped. The roll of double-sided tape in the shop is old and tends to peel up unless the wood gets clamped together, but then it gets really sticky, so the rib was clamped in place. Anyway, this held the rib securely while a hand drill was used to follow the pilot hole and pre-drill screw holes and dowel holes into the rib. The screw hole drill bit was matched to the minor diameter of the screws. In other words, the drill bit was the same width of the shaft of the screws, not including the threads. About those screws. The screws are washer head screws, so the head has good holding power and isn't likely to pull through the wood like a smaller head can. The shaft of the screw has no threads on the last 3/4 or so up by the head. This allows the screw to pull two pieces of wood together without the threads binding up and holding the two pieces apart. Pulling the rib off the top, the double-sided tape was removed, and the rib was screwed to the top so the aprons and legs could be fitted. The aprons had the same outlines and center lines marked, and pilot holes were drilled into the top in the same way they were drilled for the rib. Then they were screwed to the top. At this point, one of the aprons split along the line of one of the screws. The pilot hole was not as deep as the screw, so the pressure from the screw just split the wood. And once hickory starts splitting, it usually splits all the way across.
Ah, crap. That hickory did the worst thing that hickory can possibly do, and that is split right there.
But the good news is that it makes a pretty clean break so it can be glued back together, which was the fix here. It was glued together knowing the apron wouldn't be providing much strength perpendicular to the direction of the grain. That would come from the H-shaped stretcher that would be added later.
I'm not impressed with the glue. I think it's got cold. Darn it. It's hard here, but...
After leaving the glue to dry overnight, the apron was sanded, and you won't notice the damage unless it was pointed out. After screwing the aprons to the ribs, the legs were temporarily stuck to the aprons with cyanoacrylate glue, and then marked high up enough to avoid screwing screws into screws. These holes were drilled, and then the legs were drilled for dowel plugs using a 1/2-inch drill bit with a stop collar. The stop collar slipped a couple of times, and one of the holes ended up a bit too deep, but not deep enough to move to Plan B. Plan B would be to use a dowel as a fastener instead of a screw. Unlike most of the parts, the joints between the aprons and the legs have the same grain direction so they could be glued. The glue will make that joint very strong.
Hopefully I don't screw this up.
The actual strength that prevents the legs from spreading out and the step stool from collapsing under somebody's weight comes from the stretcher. The H-stretcher is a critical part in the strength of this design. Everything was assembled and screwed together except the stretcher. Since it wasn't important exactly how far down the legs it needed to go, the cross pieces were just cut to match each other and to fit somewhere around a couple of inches from the bottom of the legs, both at 10 degrees. Since they would be connected into the H shape using a dowel, these cuts were not compound cuts. The H stretcher is horizontal and not angled to match the legs. To hide the screws, oak dowels were glued and gently tapped into the holes, creating a pretty contrast with the hickory. A Suizon flush cut pull saw makes a very clean cut. If you want to hide the screws completely, you might consider using a plug cutter so that you can match the grain. This is a better idea with woods other than hickory because hickory plugs tend to crack or split out. Since this stool will see years, potentially decades of feet, it was finished using the same finish as the floor. That's a stool joke. You're not tricking me. All right. Please like and subscribe if you think this video was a step in the right direction. If you enjoyed this video, or even if you were hoping I would...
No, you don't want to do that. I'll do it. Right. I'll do all that stuff.
Okay. No stool jokes.
Please let us know in the comments if you have made your own stool and how it came out. We used washer screws because nobody likes a loose stool. Since this is the first of its kind, I guess I would consider it a stool prototype. You thought I was going to say stool sample, didn't you? I sat on the little stepladder for about an hour before my butt got sore, and I decided I needed a pillow. You thought I was going to say stool softener, didn't you? If you like the stool, please tell us in the comments. Please don't say the stool is crap. If you enjoyed this video, or even if you were hoping I would squeeze in another stool joke, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to click on the bell next to the word subscribe so you get notified when I upload another video. Thanks for watching. At some point, we'll build a ladder that goes over a fence, and we hope you'll like our style. So the awesome scrub cap that I'm wearing came from QT Rad Creations. You can check them out on Instagram, and their Instagram address or handle is at QT Rad Creations. QT Rad Creations. They also have an email. It is qtradcreations@gmail.com. So if you're interested in getting one of these awesome scrub caps, they will custom make these. These are custom made by the lady who does the sewing for QT Rad Creations, and she made two in this awesome orange color, and I was pretty happy with them. In fact, I'm really happy with them. They fit nicely, they're comfortable, and they keep all the dust and crap out of my hair while I'm doing all my projects. So really happy with these QT Rad creations. This is not a paid endorsement. I just happen to really like them.